Hello, welcome to Hattie Knits Along. My name's Allison, but my friends call me Hattie. I'm a knitter living in the Pacific Northwest. On this channel, I like to talk about all things knitting. What I'm working on, what you're working on, and what we are currently nerding out about. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about sock knitting. I'll show off a few of my favorite pairs and give you some tips that I've picked up along the way. I'll also fill you in on my WIPs and show off a finished object. I hope you'll stick around. Welcome back. Before we get started on sock knitting, I want to talk about what I'm wearing today. This is my Plenilune tee by Alicia Plummer. This pattern came out last summer in 2023, and it's a really fun tee pattern, t-shirt pattern that is knit with Moondrake Co.'s Fua Fua, which is a brushed cashmere. So it's a lace weight, super fluffy yarn. I think you could probably also use a Surrey alpaca and get a similar effect as the brushed cashmere. So it's like extremely soft, which I really like, but it's also very lightweight and it is warm. But it's a t-shirt and it's lacy, so it's not super warm. It has this really cool effect of cables that I could show off. And other than that, it's like really easy knitting in the round, and you just do the cable patterns like, I don't know, every 15 rounds or something, so it's not that hard to knit. And you use really big needles. I think for the main body it's a US 10, so it's very drapey, loose gauge, and it was fun to knit, and it knit up pretty quickly. So let's get started on sock knitting. So first I want to talk about why I love sock knitting. I love sock knitting for lots of different reasons. It's one of the first things I learned how to do, believe it or not, and I've always knit with DPNs or double pointed needles, which seems intimidating, I think, to some people, but is really easy once you get the hang of it. One reason I love sock knitting is that you typically just need one skein of yarn. You can find a really pretty skein that you really like, and you don't need like a whole bunch of yarn to get a finished object out of it. In fact, usually I could squeak out more than one pair of socks with a skein of yarn. So it really doesn't use much yarn at all. You know, it gives your outfits a little pop of something interesting. People notice my socks all the time, and it's fun to tell them that I made them myself. Oh, another reason, I'll show you. Very portable. This is my sock knitting bag. I always have socks going because I am part of the Farmer's Daughter Fibers Sock Squad. I have new yarn coming every month, and I am working hard to get a pair of socks done every month with that yarn. So this being October, I'm on my 10th pair for the year, and I just rotate every month. I put a new pair of socks in here, and I can throw it in a bag, throw it in my car. It's really easy to bring this around wherever I'm going and knit a few rounds. So that's a great reason to knit socks. If you are somebody who, you know, has kids, you're waiting in the car pickup line, socks are great for that. If you are, you know, going to soccer practice or things like that, you always have a pair of socks on the go. It's really helpful. Also, because socks are knit in a small circumference, it goes by really fast. Every couple of minutes you're finishing a round, and that's just really satisfying for people who like to finish things. I think it is really nice to do. Socks can be super basic. You can come up with your own recipe that works for you and just knit that all the time and just use different color yarns to mix it up. Or you can get fancy and you can do cables and lace patterns and stripes and things like that. So really you can learn a lot about knitting just doing them in socks, which is really cool. So my sock recipe, I'm gonna share it with you. I think after knitting, let's see, I think I've done 13 pairs of socks. I've definitely figured out what works best for my foot. And you can knit socks for other people that's fine. But I'm a selfish knitter. I like to knit socks for myself. I know I'm going to wear them. I know I'm going to enjoy them. I know I'm going to take care of them. So I'd rather just knit them for myself than for anybody else. If somebody really asked me for one, I would knit them one, but for my sock recipe, I like to knit top down. So that means I start with the cuff and I knit down through the leg, through the heel, through the foot, and to finish with the toe. And I just like the way that works a lot better for me, partly because when I've done toe up, I feel like my bind offs can be much tighter than my cast ons, and then the cuff of the sock is too tight and I can't get it on my foot. So I really like doing a stretchy cast on and starting with that and making sure that I can get it over my foot. So my favorite cast on is the German twisted cast on. It gives it a nice stretch, and that is really helpful for getting it over your foot. I like to do, you know, maybe like a 2x1 ribbing around the cuff, and do the cuff for maybe like 1.5 inches, and then do the leg, whatever the leg's going to be, if it's just straight stockinette or if there's some sort of pattern there. And then I prefer to do a heel flap and gusset, and that I'll show you. So a heel flap and gusset. A heel flap and gusset is this flap. You knit this first, then you knit what's called a heel turn, and then you pick up stitches on the side of your sock and you decrease, and this is called the gusset, the decrease section. So that makes a really nice heel that is pretty easy to put over your foot, and it fits my foot really well. Some people don't like it, but I think it just depends on the shape of your foot. So that's part of finding out your sock recipe, is what works best for your shaped foot. For my heel flap, I like to do a slip stitch heel flap and just think it looks prettier. This is a slip stitch one. This is a slip stitch heel flap, so you can see it just looks prettier, I think. After you do the gusset, you just knit the foot. I think this is a good tip too. A lot of times you stop doing, while you do the texture all over on your leg, you stop doing texture on the bottom for your foot because you don't really want to feel all that texture when you're walking around on your sock. So you get the pretty texture on top, and then straight stockinette on the bottom. And then we end with a wedge toe, which is really easy, and we finish it off with a Kitchener stitch, so it's basically invisible at the top. That's my sock recipe. Oh, I forgot. I always cast on 64 stitches, unless for some reason the pattern that I'm doing needs like a slightly, like an odd number, then I would do 65, or if it needs a certain number of stitches, I could wiggle it a little bit. But I find 64 stitches works best for me when I'm using size 1 double pointed needles. So that's my sock recipe. Feel free to take it, or look up. There's so many tutorials on how to knit socks, and everybody has their own recipe. If you look up vanilla socks, that means just like plain socks, and it's a great way to start sock knitting. So let me show you my first pair of socks. They're a little faded after being washed so many times, and they look a little silly. I think my gusset was real deep or something, I don't know, but they look a little funny. Let me show you one. This must have been my first one. Look at that ribbing. It's a little wonky. Anyways, they're still holding up. I knit these like 2.5 years ago, and I can still wear them all the time. So I think that some people are worried about sock knitting, saying like, I would just like wear a hole in them so fast, but I don't think that that's really true. Like, I don't wear shoes in my house, so all winter long I'm walking around in socks, and I wear these outside in my boots and stuff, and I have yet to get a hole in any socks that I've knit. So maybe I'm just a gentle walker, but I really don't think that being worried about wearing holes in them is a reason to stay away from sock knitting. I think you could figure it out. So that was my first pair. I pulled out a few different styles so you could see the gamut here. So Stephen West is a really fun designer. If you look back on my first episode, I knit his Penguino for my son, and it was too small, so that was the whole thing. But the last 2 summers, he's done a surprise sock along, and that's been really fun. You'll get a different clue each week, and you don't know what the finished sock is going to look like until you're all done. So last summer's was the first one, and this was what I knit. It was really fun. So you can get pretty wild with socks. This has a combo of like slip stitching and striping and some cabling down on the foot. So you can really go all out. Oh, let me show you the ones from this year. Hold on, I'll be right back. Sorry, I kind of already wore these recently. So sorry if they're a little dirty, but look at them from this year. Isn't that wild? Look at those welts. And then all this like lace work on the foot. It was very fun. Oh, and then I got to do brioche for the first time on the heel flap. So like, I do think socks are a really cool way to try new techniques that you haven't done before without a lot of overhead, without, if you're trying to lace for the first time on a sweater and you bought all this yarn for it and then you find out, I really hate knitting lace, then you're like in the hole for all that yarn. And so it's just a great way to practice on a very small scale without a lot of overhead. So another great reason to knit socks. So let's see. I have some cable knit socks that are very pretty. These are shorty socks, so I just didn't make much of a leg at all, and basically just did the cuff and then started with the heel flap and gusset in the foot, and that's really fun. You can do stripes. This heel flap's a little different. It's not a slip stitch, and it has like a garter stitch ridge. This is a different kind of heel. This is a short row heel. So just knit short rows back and forth to make this heel. And this has a lot of mosaic knitting where we were slipping one and knitting one at each color transition. Unfortunately, this color, this hot pink bled into the white a little bit, so that was unfortunate, but still pretty. And then of course lace. I was showing the sock off earlier, but lace is a really pretty thing to put into socks, and I like to wear these with some like Mary Jane clogs that I have, because then it shows off the lace pattern. And then of course you can do color work and other things with socks. Okay, so now I want to talk about the different tools that I think are pretty essential for knitting socks. Now of course everybody's going to have their different opinions about what's essential and what's not, but being a pretty avid sock knitter, these are the things that I use almost every single time. So The first thing is DPNs, size 1. These are ChalGoo. Let me take them out and show you. DPN is a double pointed needle, meaning it has points on both ends. And typically you need at least 3 to make your round, or I like to use 4, and then you have a 5th one to be your working needle, and you switch it as you go along. I actually have several sets of size 1s because sometimes I want to do 2 pairs of socks at a time, or I want to do 2 socks at a time, and this is the best way to do that. You can also buy a set of double pointed needles that come in all the different sizes. This goes from 0 to 3, or 2 millimeters to 3.25 millimeters. Size 1 is 2.25 millimeters, so that's what I normally use. But depending on what you're working on, you might want to size up. Or if you have a different gauge than me, I'm a pretty tight knitter, so you might need to size down. When I use DPNs, I've found that they like to poke holes in all of the bags that I keep my socks in. So to avoid that from happening, I have this little neat thing. I think I just bought it from somebody on Etsy, but you could easily make this yourself. It's just a piece of fabric with some, what do you call this? I told you I'm not a sewer. The stuff that you put inside fabric to make it feel stiffer, whatever that's called. It just has some of that in there, and then some snaps, and it easily goes over your needles. Snap it shut. Your project's safe. It's not gonna come unraveled, and you can keep it in your bag and it won't poke holes through everything. So I like to do that. I guess that's not an essential, but if you're like me and you don't want holes in all your project bags, it's pretty essential. Let's see. I need a little pair of scissors all the time. Cut threads. If I'm knitting color work in the round, with socks, I like to use these shorties from ChalGoo. They're, well, basically, I have this little set of short tips, and they're small sizes. So I think it also goes from like 0 to size 3. And there's a 2-inch tip and a 3-inch tip for each. There's 2 2-inch tips and 2 3-inch tips of each size. But when I'm knitting color work, I will put a 2-inch tip on my left hand for my left hand needle and a 3-inch tip on my right hand needle. And that I like to have a bigger needle to hold on to on my working needle, and that's really great for small circumference knitting. The other essential is a tape measure. I just picked this up at like a fiber show, but whatever cute little tape measure you want is good. Tape measures are really good for when you want to knit a certain length leg, or you know how long your foot needs to be. You can use the tape measure to see where you're at with that. Darning needles. So this is just a set of darning needles that I have, but the smallest one is the one I use because I'm using fingering weight yarn for my socks. And that is for your Kitchener stitch at the end, which is how I sew the toe closed, and also for weaving in all those pesky ends. Finally, sock blockers are not essential in my book. I think you could wash your socks and then wear them and they will even themselves out. But especially if you want to take pretty pictures of your knits, you might want to get some sock blockers. I first got these like really pretty wooden ones off of Etsy, and they're gorgeous, but I don't know if it's just this one or if other ones would be better, but I found even though I sanded the edges, my yarn just like snags on the edges of this wood all the time, and it freaks me out, and I don't want to like accidentally rip a hole in my socks with that, so I don't really use those anymore. I got these metal ones off of Amazon, and this works much better for me, and plus they have these nice hangers. I can hang them up so that they dry really quick, and there's no rough edges for snags or anything like that. And the set that I bought had 3 different sizes, so if I ever do want to knit socks for somebody else, I can do that. But the medium works best for me. So I think those are all the essentials that I would use on a daily basis. But there's also some really cool sock books that I wanted to share. We've got Charming Colorwork Socks by Charlotte Stone. This is such a great book. There's so many different colorwork patterns in here, and it's so inspiring and just really fun to look at. There's like seasonal ones. If you see on the back, there's like snowflakes and tangerines and swans and butterflies, and it's just really fun, different designs in color work. And then this one is by Lina Magazine, 52 Weeks of Socks, and now I think they've come out with another one of these, a second book, but 52 different patterns of socks in here. So many things to inspire you, from lace work to color work to more simple socks. Really fun. And then if you're brand new to sock knitting and you really want to learn all there is to learn about it, I would look up Summer Lee's The Sock Project. Summer Lee is a very prolific and wonderful sock designer. In fact, I would say like at least half of the socks that I've knit are her designs, which is awesome. But in here, she tells you how to get the perfect fit. She tells you how to create your own sock recipe, and then there's some really fun patterns in here as well that you won't find on her Ravelry. You'll just find it in this book. So this book's really fun, and it just came out over, I think, in the springtime. So I would highly recommend that one. I want to show you really quick how I use DPNs to knit socks and other small circumference things, because I think it looks intimidating, but it really isn't. And I think starting with them, it can be a little bit finicky at the very beginning, but once you get going with it, it's really simple. And let me show you. So I like to have 4 needles in my knitting at all times, and that creates a circle. Since I have a 64 stitch foot, I have 16 stitches on each needle. And I have my 5th needle here, which is my working needle. And I just knit to the end of a needle. So I knit my 16 stitches. And as I'm knitting, my stitches are being transferred from my left hand needle to my right hand needle. So when I'm done with these 16 stitches, my left hand needle will be free, and all the stitches will be on my right needle, and on this one free. And my yarn will be at the end of that needle, so I can move on to the next needle. And I'm not going to do that right now. But you can see, like, you're just switching the needles through as you go around. So it's really simple, and I highly recommend it, because I think the other option for socks would be, well, there's 2 options for socks. You could do a 9-inch circular, which is what I do for color work, but I don't know. I just don't prefer that all the time. And I think partly because sometimes it feels like it's stretching things out. When you're using, especially when you're decreasing your stitches for the toe and things like that, when you're using DPNs, you could have like just 2 stitches on each needle, and it could get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you don't have to worry about it stretching or anything like that. The other option that you could do is magic loop. Magic loop requires you having a cable that's super long so that you could have 2 loops on either side of your knitting as you're going around, and basically you split your stitches in half and you knit one half, pull your loop through, and then you knit the other half. And that has its time and place too. Like when I was knitting the sleeve for my poly cardigan, it's in the round and you know, you're constantly increasing. So I did do magic loop on that. But I just really prefer DPNs. I just feel like they're no nonsense. They work with any size circumference and it's really simple to do. So let me know down below, what do you prefer for small circumference? Do you prefer magic loop? Do you prefer 9-inch circulars? Or are you a DPN person like me? So, all right, so now it's time to talk about my finished object for the week. My finished object this week is the Iris Hat by Sari Nordlund. Here it is. She's beautiful. So let me unroll her. You could see it was a top-down hat. So I started with a circular cast on and I knit increases for a few inches until I got to the desired width, and then I knit 1 by 1 ribbing over and over and over until the end, and I did a regular, you know, bind off in pattern, and I blocked it, and when it was dry I did a triple folded brim. Okay, let me show you what this looks like on. So it has quite a thick brim, but I think that's going to be really nice in the winter time. And if you watched my last videos, you would see that I knit this with a strand of mohair and a strand of superwash merino, fingering weight merino. And I used Ocean Knits and Fibers for the yarn. The mohair was the colorway Tidal Pools, and the merino was a colorway Plankton Mandala. So I really love the fabric that it created. And this is going to be quite a warm hat, but I think it'll be nice in the winter time. And it's my rainbow hat, so it's going to go with everything. It's like rainbow neutral, if there's such a thing. You know, Stephen West says that neon is a new neutral, and I think rainbow is the new neutral. So that's my finished object. I was really happy with this pattern. I mean, it is a paid-for pattern and it's pretty simple. I think if you know how to knit 1 by 1 ribbing and you just knit for a long time in the round, you can create something very similar. But I really enjoy the designer Sari Nordlund, and I'm happy to support designers who I know work really hard for the money that they do make. I do apologize if you hear lots of children noises in the background. My kids are in the other room and they are not great at being quiet, but we will continue. So now it is time for my works in progress. My first work in progress is my October sock from Farmer's Daughter Fibers. So like I said before, I received the Farmer's Daughter Fibers Sock Squad membership or subscription, and I get that every month. It comes with a full skein of one color and a mini skein of another. And this month's colors, I've showed them off a couple times now, but these were the colors from this month. Really pretty. And I decided to go with another summerly design for my sock this month, it is the broken rope sock. So it's some broken ribbing with some striping. Broken ribbing with some striping. And it's got a heel flap and gusset. And let's see, I'll take this thing off. I am through the heel flap, I'm through the gusset decreases. And now I'm just going to be knitting the foot for a while. And then I have to knit the second sock after that. But that's okay. It'll be fine. So I'm really liking this pattern. I think it's going to be very cozy for the fall. I think, you know, broken rib is very stretchy, as you can see. So it's definitely going to fit on my foot in this. It might be a little loose, so we'll see how it fits when I'm all done. But I think this really suits the colors that I received this month, so I'm happy with that. And my goal is to finish it before the end of the month. So I think I'm definitely on track for that. So my next work in progress is the poly cardigan. I really wanted to finish the sleeve before I filmed this, but I didn't have a chance to finish it all the way. But here's where I was last week. And here is, I'm almost there. I think I have like an inch or maybe an inch and a half left to finish the sleeve. So I'm very close. So let's put it on, because I was worried about how big it was. It's definitely got positive ease. You can see where my arm is and where the sleeve is. But as it's knitting up, I don't think it's too big. I think it's gonna look nice. And yeah, it's gonna be a big comfy cardigan. Not like a small thin cardigan, but it's gonna be cozy, and that'll be nice because it's a thick fabric knit with worsted weight yarn. If you want to know more about the yarn, you can check out my first video, and that has all the details on that. But yeah, so I'm almost done with this first sleeve, and then I'll do the second sleeve, and then I'll start the body. And I think the sleeves are pretty quick. I just have been pretty busy this week and didn't have a time to finish this off, but I did get a good chunk done. So that is that on the poly cardigan, and hopefully next week I'll have more updates for you about that. Okay, now it's time for our knit along community chat. So in this part of the podcast, I like to talk about what you all are working on. I think that it's really interesting to find out what each other are working on, because it gives us some inspiration, and also it shows us that we're all part of this knitting community, and we all want to share and learn from each other. And you know, I'm happy to talk all about what I'm working on, but I do think it's really interesting to find out what other people are working on as well, and I hope that I can continue this segment for a long time. So if you've made it this far, make sure you like this video and leave a comment below on what you're currently working on, and then also subscribe so you can see what I talk about next week and if I mention what you're working on. So thank you so much for everybody who's tuned in so far and for all your wonderful comments. As I read through these, I'm going to guess at people's names, and if I get them wrong, I apologize ahead of time, but I'm doing my best. So we have Cindy H, I think, said that they bought some yarn for the Always Be Brave shawl by Helen Kennedy, and that looks really beautiful. It looks like it's made in fingering weight yarn, and it has some slip stitching, I think, to make that pattern. It's an asymmetrical triangle shawl knitted sideways from the tip to the broad edge, and it's knitted mostly in stockinette with different rows of contrasting slip stitch pattern, and it looks really gorgeous. So thank you for sharing that, Cindy. And a lot of you mentioned that you are interested in knitting the pressed flowers cardigan, which I highlighted in my last video, my own pressed flowers cardigan. So many of you said you have the yarn or are about to buy the yarn for it but haven't started it yet. So I hope my video really inspired you to get that on the needles and start it up, because it's really worth it. And some other people, I think Stephanie said that they're knitting 3+ pressed flowers hats for Christmas gifts, which is really beautiful gifts. And they look forward to knitting the cardigan and the kerchief as well. And Lorraine said they're knitting the Stick Season sweater by Rebecca Clow. That is definitely on my to knit list. It's really beautiful. Plus, I'm really obsessed with Noah Kahan and the Stick Season album. You can ask my family. I play that album constantly. Let me know if you like that music too. But I think it's awesome. So I think it's really fun that Rebecca Clow made a sweater off of that song, Stick Season. Let's see. Sandra says they're knitting the penny gloves from Petite Knit. That sounds really fun. I'm going to look those up. They're fingerless mitts that are worked seamlessly from the cuff to the fingers, and they can be worked on either double pointed needles or on magic loop. Super simple fingerless mitts, but timeless, and you could always use them, right? Danielle says they're working on the Simple Sweater by Tin Can Knits, and they're using leftover yarn to work on it, which is great. Tin Can Knits is so good. If you're new to knitting, their patterns are always really simple to follow, and they really break things down. I think they have their own app now where they even have tons of video tutorials for their patterns, and they'll just teach you all the basics that you need to learn how to knit a sweater or socks or hats. I knit my son a sweater. Oh, I knit him little baby leggings when he was a baby using a Tin Can Knits pattern, and it was really easy to follow, and that was pretty complicated because I had to knit 2 legs at a time, and I had never done anything like it before. So I highly recommend, if you're newer to knitting, looking up Tin Can Knit patterns. So Beautiful is working on the Ruth and Ruthie shawl by Jo of Twinset and Pearl, and with that they're using the Roxy sock yarn. Oh, Leo and Roxy sock yarn, and also their silk mohair. Case is working on the men's classic raglan pullover by Jane Richmond. Thanks for sharing. And that's all the shares for this week, but thank you for everybody who shared what you are working on and just left really lovely, nice comments this week. It was such a pleasure to see them popping up throughout the week, and I really appreciate all of them. So that's all I have for today. I really look forward to making more videos for you. I'm enjoying this process a lot, and if you have any questions about what I talked about, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on YouTube, of course, but also I'm on Instagram at Hattie Knits Along, and my email address is hattyknitsalong@gmail.com. So please feel free to let me know anything that you want, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Happy knitting. Bye.